Hello, welcome to EPG Pathshala. I am Dr. Anurekha Chariwag, Assistant Professor, Savitribai Phule, Pune University. I have coordinated the paper on Sociology of India and have written this module, Disciplinary History and Discipline in Making. This module is the second section of the larger theme, Origin, Development and Institutionalization of Sociology in India. In this module, we are going to focus on the manner in which any discipline gets institutionalized, especially in the manner in which departments are shaped, especially focusing on teaching and research, institutional biographies, institutional histories, the relationship in terms of spatiality and understanding of how knowledge gets constructed, and an understanding that the relationship between insider and outsider, and whether the writing of institutional biographies or institutional history has anything to do with the manner in which we are part of the department and in through that way constructing the discipline in itself. It is important to examine the history of sociology in India as it provides 1. Its practitioners an understanding of the manner in which knowledge is produced and legitimated. 2. The role that institutions such as state play in shaping what is recognized as knowledge. And 3. What are the institutionalized practices? Duncan argues that the historical study of social sciences is important as it helps us to recognize that social sciences stand at the nexus of power and knowledge, where on the one hand universities and other research institutions generate and incubate ideas, and at the other end programs of the state and non-state institutions design and implement social and political action programs that play a crucial role in shaping the world we live in. According to Duncan, the institutional sites that could be analyzed for developing disciplinary histories include universities, research institutes, laboratories, think tanks, government agencies, and philanthropic foundations. Thus, one crucial way in which to analyze the history of the discipline includes writing about disciplinary histories through analyzing the history of the university departments that offer degrees, conduct research, and are dominant institutions that institutionalize what the disciplines stand for through their teaching and research program. Further, in the context of India, sociology through the mediation of colonialism was started within university departments and later became the main site for structuring the ways in which the discipline was shaped. This module is structured in the following manner. Initially, the conceptual framework for analyzing the departments will be examined, and then the Bombay University Department of Sociology in India will be examined to locate the larger structures that led to its institutionalization, 2. Examine what kind of perspectives was institutionalized through its teaching and research interventions, and 3. To know who are the scholars that frame the sociological discourse in India. Section 1. Conceptual Framework. Doing Disciplinary History. Guerin argues that while discussing about disciplinary histories, it is important to ask questions such as who has written such histories? What diverse functions are served by disciplinary histories? What images of science emerge with regularity? What are the connections between the written history of a discipline and the changing beliefs and practices of its scientists? These are, I believe, very important and critical questions that challenge the sociologist in us. Why? Because it entails a process where, when critically examining the history, it also pushes us to challenge ourselves. It is important to recognize that who writes the history is crucial. Why is this important? According to Guerin, the location of oneself either as an insider or outsider would have an impact on the manner in which history is written and constructed. Why is this? As students of sociology, one recognizes that all human knowledge is produced socially and is bounded by society itself. Thus, one standpoint would shape the way history is incorporated into the analysis and structure the framework. It is important that insider's history is legitimation where the past is reinterpreted to justify today's assertion. As Chaudhary argues, writing and examining institutional histories are problematic and challenging. Why? Especially so more if the person writing is an insider who is part of the history in terms of its everyday life and recollection. For an insider writing history, the challenge would be in terms of the contentious nature of history and the fact that others will have a different story to the history. The question is then, why should one write these institutional histories? There are 3 important reasons. 1. Disciplinary histories through an examination of institutions serve pedagogic functions, especially familiarizing students with their own disciplinary trajectories. Such a perspective would help students to understand their own disciplines and important institutions within the historical context. Such a location would thus facilitate the students to have a better understanding of the perspectives and again gain sights into the way knowledge gets constructed and legitimized. Secondly, as Chaudhary argues, that histories are discourses that shape institutional directions. Thus, historically analyzing the past institutional history would help in constructing identities and provide insights into the ways that structure the future of the discipline. As Patel argues, the specific localized visions structures the distinctive practices of scholarship and learning in this context. Finally, disciplinary histories completed and complicated by the studies of the histories of the global, histories that are of multiple ways in which global politics or aspects of it has been conceptualized is important. What is this study referred to as? Such an approach is conceptualized as historical ontology. Analysis of knowledge practices and complexes is what the philosopher Ian Hacking referred to as historical ontology. Such an approach, which includes two aspects: one, analysis of how certain institutional formations and modes of knowledge come into being, and two, how scholarly identities are created and reproduced. In this context, it becomes pertinent to question the creation and disseminations of global, national, regional order by the institutional development of modern research university. It is important to understand that knowledge is a complex interlinkage between institutions, networks, and organizational structures. Through an assemblage of these, knowledge is facilitated, rendered intelligible, and disseminated. Further, it is important to recognize that there are various diverse sites of knowledge production and legitimation. Duncan discusses two main arguments that justify the writing of disciplinary histories. One, the endogenous argument that stresses on the intellectual benefit of the discipline under discussion would considerably improve the quality of contemporary scholarship of the discipline. 2. The exogenous arguments that emphasize a variety of political and intellectual purposes. Such an endeavor would be a fascinating site for analyzing the interlinkages between knowledge, power, and institutions. Specifically within sociology, there has been a debate with regard to critically examining the university departments of sociology. To this end, Patel argues that within sociology, there is critical discussion of the critical intervention of the Chicago department in development of a new Chicago school, which played an important role in the reformulation of the discipline. Jairam, emphasizing the importance of analyzing departments of sociology, argues that they are important because in the post-independence period, the Indian nation state had pushed the departments to create professional sociologists who would be able to examine the impact of planned social change initiated by the state on the traditional social institutions defining the society in India. Thus, in the initial years, the emphasis of the university departments was research, which gradually changed over the years with more focus on teaching. In this context, I argue that in the neoliberal education system, the emphasis is back on research, but in the form of pressure on the faculty of the university departments to engage in seeking funded research, thereby generating revenue for the university and educations based on the ability of the faculty to bring in funding for the department and university. Patel argues analysis of schools and the role of departments has to be conducted within the macro context of the policy of higher education of the nation state. Examining disciplinary histories within the site of university departments are crucial to analyzing the growth of the discipline of sociology in India. It is understood that through such analysis, one could trace the development of sociology as a discipline and its institutionalization within the higher education structures of India. Further, given the fact that sociology was introduced within university departments with other disciplines such as anthropology, economics, history, Indology, and the initial practitioners were trained in disciplines other than sociology, needs to be analyzed for historically locating disciplinary trajectories within university departments. Section B. Methodological challenges. Chaudhary states that as a researcher, one has to be sensitive to the complexities involved in recollections and memoirs of scholars engaged in teaching and research in the departments. In this context, the arguments of Duncan is relevant. He believes that analysis of social sciences needs to employ interpretative protocols and techniques that map the complex institutional terrain of modern university linkages to government and corporate actors, which are cognate sites of intellectual production. Based on his analysis of international relations as a discipline, Duncan argues that analyzing institutional origins must be located within the discursive context rather than assigning them slots in simplistic disciplinary growth. In this context, one has to be careful of discipline defining myths. Myths in this anthropological reading are highly simplified narratives ascribing fixed and coherent meanings to selected events, peoples and places. What do disciplinary mythologies do? The mythologies generally perform the various legitimating functions, which includes classifying some positions, product of intellectual progress, help to mark and police boundaries of the discipline, and shape the self-understanding of scholars. In similar questioning of the process of endeavor to map the legacy of a school and department, Hegde argues that it is important to ask the question whether and to what extent it is possible to analyze legacies based on certain parts in isolation from the rest. Thus, the context becomes crucial, where Jairam, in his analysis of sociology in Karnataka, argues that the biography of the discipline can be understood only in its institutional context. He argues the institutional context is subject to the vicissitudes of change in a socio-economic and cultural milieu. So, it can be understood only sociologically. Thus, in order to grasp the historical development of modern social sciences, we have to 1. Map the history of concepts and arguments, 2. Analyze institutions and networks, and 3. Examine the complex nexus between institutions, agents and knowledge production. In order to understand the discipline, it is important to understand the past contributions. A leading practitioner of the discipline of sociology once observed, "The problem with us is not that the small amount of good work done by preceding generations is unjustly criticized by succeeding ones, but that it is ignored and then quickly forgotten. In India, each generation of sociologists seems eager to start its work on a clean slate, with little or no attention to the work done before. This amnesia about the work of the predecessors is no less distinctive of Indian sociologists than their failure to innovate." Bete. For embarking on the critical project of analyzing the institutional biography of sociology, we need to undertake what Jairam refers to as sensitive reading of sociology's own biography, that is, where the institutions of sociology are located, the time period when it was established, and the scholars that define the discipline through the research and teaching practices need to be examined. Rao contends that the 4 departments, Bombay, Lucknow, Calcutta and Mysore, formed the earliest schools of sociology, and they reflected different trends due to their varied orientation and approach. Section 2. Disciplinary History and Sociology in India. In this section, I will focus on one important department of sociology in India and examines its role in institutionalizing sociology. Bete states that it is important for the students of sociology to recognize that the first generation of sociologists in India, Radhakamal Mukherjee, G.S. Ghure and D.P. Mukherjee, were all university members in the proper sense of term. Pioneers because as far as sociology went, they were mostly self-taught. It includes the Department of Sociology in University of Bombay and examines its impact on the larger field of practices of sociology in India. The initial question is why the Bombay department. Focusing on the department is important because of the following interlinking reasons. 1. The University of Bombay is one of the first institutions of higher learning to be established by the colonial state in 1857, and it was the first teaching department of social anthropology and sociology. Dhanagre argues that along with Delhi and Lucknow, Bombay had a strong presence as one of the leading centers of sociology. The second important point why we should focus on Bombay University is that it housed 2 of the most respected and recognized scholars, Professor G.S. Ghure and Professor A.R. Desai, who were seminal in shaping of sociology that was practiced in India. It is interesting to note that Professor G.S. Ghure and Professor A.R. Desai had distinct and opposing theoretical paradigms, methodological perspectives and pedagogical practices, and each in its own way shaped sociology practiced in the region and in India as a whole. Dhanagre argues that within disciplinary histories, one should be sensitive to the personification of the department, as the historical process of development of sociology is linked to academic activities of these scholars. Continuing this line, Dhanagre states that the personification of scholars was a strategy to carve out the identity of sociology from within the dominant sister disciplines such as anthropology. It also helps to fight for funds and helps to create a specialized identity of sociology as a scientific discipline. Further, a number of outstanding scholars of sociology who through their engagement, research and publication have shaped the discipline were trained in the department of Mumbai University. Noteworthy among them are M.N. Srinivas, Iravati Karve, I.P. Desai and Y.B. Damle. Further, it is the sociology department at the Bombay University that played a crucial role in the professionalization of the discipline of sociology, especially through the establishment of Indian Sociological Society, the professional association of sociologists in India, and the inception of its journal, Sociological Bulletin, an outstanding journal maintaining the highest standards of academic rigor. The analysis of Bombay department based upon the analysis of D.N. Dhanagre in the context of its impact on universities of Pune, sociology department was interesting and it caught one's imagination and curiosity as a sociologist. Studying and teaching at the department since 1997 to the present has made me an insider. Contextualizing my insider status while analyzing the institutional history of the discipline interested the sociologist in me to engage with the analysis. Lastly, given the context that this is a limited word module and the complexity of the debate, it would be logical and practical to focus on one department so that the students would understand 1. Why the need to embark on critically examining disciplinary histories, and 2. Through the analysis of specific department, understand the structuring of the discipline, and 3. Motivate them to reflect on their own departments and relate it to the sociology that they practice and engage with. To analyze the disciplinary history of sociology in India, institutionalized within Bombay University Sociology Department, I will examine the works of Manorama Savur and D.N. Dhanagre. I would like to add that though the focus is on the department, the fact that it engages with one of the oldest department would also throw light on the institutionalization of sociology in India generally and the ideological approaches of G.S. Ghure and the Marxist perspective of A.R. Desai specifically. Section F. Institutionalizing Sociology in India, the Disciplinary History in Bombay School. Savur focuses on the context, highlighting 3 issues. 1. The role of the state. 2. The administration, especially the powers represented in the office of the Senate. And 3. The individuals who direct and shape the vision of sociology through the research and teaching. An important aspect of Savur's analysis was that it was based on archival research of Bombay University records that gave her access to the much valuable administrative documentation that shaped institutionalizing sociology in the department. Savur argues that the nature of sociology institutionalized in Bombay University was a conservative one, believed to have facilitated and continuation of a status quoist sociology. The important question then is, how did a conservative orientation of sociology get institutionalized in Bombay, that which then shaped the sociology practiced in India? In order to address this question, it is important to focus on the role played by the colonial state that institutionalized sociology in the Bombay University department. 3 universities, Bombay, Calcutta and Madras, were set up in 1857, argues Savur, was a defensive act to appease the aggravated middle class who helped the British and wanted the colonial state to award them by offering work in the lower bureaucracy, especially as clerks in low administrative positions. By then, the colonial state had realized that a number of higher administrative posts were taken away from the British by the Indian natives. As Savur argues, if setting up 3 universities in India in 1857 was a defensive political act, then introducing sociology during a wartime crisis cannot but be a panic reaction too. What were the areas of concern for the colonial leaders? The colonial state realized that they had to greater control over the university research and teaching, as they were growing concerned about the growing nationalism among Indian students in its various forms, including there were broad-based religious revivalist movements both within Hinduism and Islam in the late 19th century, which caught the imagination of youth. One could also see the rise of militant nationalism among the youth. And third, the colonial rulers believed that the Indian students learned a lot about the ideas of nationalism, civil liberties and constitutional literature by reading works of British philosophers, leaders and social scientists. Thus, the challenge for colonial state was to draw the educated youth away from new tide of nationalism. The interesting question is why sociology? Savoor argues that we need to recognize that academic sociology was a strong reaction to a powerful people's movement which culminated in French Revolution. The fact that Auguste Comte was recognized as the father of sociology institutionalized and legitimated the conservative perspective of positive philosophy, which was then taken forward by Durkheim, who followed Comtean philosophy. Further, Savoor argues that the academic sociology institutionalized in India was a conservative brand of sociology, the larger idea being to instill conservative perspective among students that would not challenge the status quo. Peter Geddes was the first chair professor of sociology at Bombay University, Department of Sociology. Munshi argues that Geddes, though was a distinguished town planner and geographer, he was not very much interested in studying society in India. Thus, his work did not have much influence on Indian sociology. The legacy of Bombay University Department of Sociology, the scholarship of G.S. Ghure. How was this conservative perspective introduced? Savoor states that G.S. Ghure, an outstanding scholar of Sanskrit, was sent to England to train within the intellectual domain of Herbert Spencer so as to develop an apolitical sociological perspective. Herbert Spencer believed in the organismic conception of sociology and perceived society as a self-regulated system based upon systemic patterns of interdependence. Savoor argues that by focusing on Spencer, the sociological perspectives of Karl Marx and Max Weber, which was believed to be revolutionary and challenging the status quo, was ignored. Once in England, Ghure trained in anthropology in Cambridge, as it was believed that he was insensitive to Indian social context and to its history. The anthropological approach to sociology, as he believed that there is no need to distinguish between social anthropology and sociology. Savoor cites Ghure, anthropological approach to sociology is most appropriate. The question then is what kind of issues were engaged with and what could be referred to as the legacy of Ghure. Savoor and Dhanagre argue that it introduced areas of anthropological interest such as narrative and descriptive studies of tribes, especially institutions such as marriage, family and rituals. Later, Ghure and his students did initiate research on changing urban scenario, especially the process of industrialization. Savoor argues that it led to the formation of two new specializations, industrial and urban sociology in India. The students trained by Ghure within the Indological approach started teaching in different universities in India, teaching more often than not anthropologized sociology, which he argues led to a lack of analysis with the state, inequalities and no engagement with development. What was then the impact of such an approach to sociology in India? Savoor argues that the trajectory taken by sociology led to a permanent loss in the planning and development process. Further, Dhanagre argues that Ghure's pedagogic practices revealed that he never engaged with social realities and institutionalized a descriptive tradition of doing sociology in India. Such a history has led to a lack of self-criticality among sociologists in India and impacted the growth of sociology as a scientific discipline, as sociology in India could never deal with social realities analytically. The legacy of Bombay University Department of Sociology, the scholarship of A.R. Desai. Savoor argues that it was with the scholarship of A.R. Desai that sociology came into its own. With Desai's background of Marxism and trade unionism, his work was based on historical materialism, engaged with issues such as economic recession and Naxalbari peasant movements that questioned agrarians' reform, established a liberal. With Desai's background of Marxism and trade unionism, his work was based on historical materialism, engaged with issues such as economic recession and Naxalbari peasant movements that questioned India's agrarian reform and established a liberal left tradition within the department. Savoor and Dhanagre argued that the legacy of Desai includes important practices within research and teaching. According to them, Desai made substantial changes in the curriculum where he incorporated the works of Marxist and neo-Marxist and introduced new specializations. With the introduction of diverse courses such as theoretical sociology, introduction to European and American theories, sociology of development, sociology of Indian society, Desai's insistence on theoretical and analytical framework was extremely important, where the students were engaged to analyze inequality by integrating theory and practices. Through emphasis on analytically linking the macro structures of the state to micro experiences with historical analysis, Desai was able to slowly disentangle from anthropology, thereby strengthening the analytical potential of the discipline of sociology. Further, Desai introduced newer pedagogical practices where he pushed the students to look beyond the classroom, the department and the library, and interlink research, learning, teaching and activism. Desai, importantly, through insistence on theoretical and analytical framework, pushed students to think and analyze critically. Specifically, Savoor argues that Desai organized regular open house meetings attended by students, teachers, scholars of various departments to discuss new books, concepts, and thus assured in a practice of interdisciplinary. Desai, through his emphasis on collaborative departmental research, encouraged research as a collective activity and training. In this context, the analysis of Jodhka is relevant, where he states that one important aspect that gets reflected by analyzing the practices of sociology in India, the kind of people who come to occupy positions of power in the university system and the kind of knowledge they produce about Indian society. The collective legacy of Ghurye and Desai, Dhanagre argues, include a shared commitment to the discipline, meticulousness, methodological rigorousness, intellectual integrity, and importantly academic freedom to pursue studies or research according to one's intellectual orientation. This last aspect is reflected on the fact that A.R. Desai was a student of G.S. Ghurye and they had completely different perspectives towards the practice of sociology in India. The influence of Sociology Department at the University of Pune, renamed as Savitribai Phule Pune University. Dhanagre's analysis of practice of sociology at this university, along with secondary analysis, was also based on his insider status as he taught in this university. According to Dhanagre, it should be contextualized that teaching sociology in Pune was started in 1949, almost 2 decades after postgraduate research and teaching started in Bombay. Sociology practiced in Pune was influenced by two most eminent scholars, Iravati Karve and Y.B. Damle, students of Ghurye. It is also important to understand that when sociology was introduced, it was within the already established anthropology department of the university. The manner in which Iravati Karve organized the teaching and research focus of the department, one could see the presence of G.S. Ghurye, especially in terms of focus on ethnic complexity, structural institutions and social biology. Dhanagre argues that for a long time social biology, with its focus on biological basis of human society, races and cultures and eugenics and euthenics was taught to the students of sociology. It is important to recognize that though Karve was influenced by the Indological perspective of Ghurye, she differed from it by acknowledging the non-Brahmanical contributions to the diversities of Indian society. Damle's sociological work, on the other hand, did not see much influence of either Ghurye or Karve. Dhanagre argues that Damle was much influenced by the theoretical perspectives of structural functionalism of Talcott Parsons and Robert Merton. Thus, by focusing on areas such as social stratification, social change and sociological theory, especially systems theory, Dhanagre argues that Damle gave a new direction to the practice of sociology in India. Such a direction questioned the complacency of Indology and pushed for systematic analysis of society. What Damle carried forward with the legacy of Ghurye and Desai is a legacy of intellectual freedom, argues Dhanagre. By encouraging international collaboration, development of new courses by young colleagues, policy of non-interference in professional engagements, emphasis of rigor and methodology, Dhanagre argues gave a growth orientation to the discipline. Many of his students did exceptionally well. For example, T.K. Umen, who did pioneering work in the area of sociology of movements by emphasizing on theoretical rigor and grassroots empirical data. The Bombay School, which is one of the leading department, has through its theoretical rigorous perspective has created a substantive body of knowledge. Thus, the important legacy of Bombay Sociology Department include theoretical and methodological rigor and intellectual freedom, which are the core for nurturing critical analytical perspective within the practices of sociology in India. Conclusion. We started the module by asking the question why institutional histories and argued that there are 3 reasons. 1. Pedagogic, where history familiarizes the students with their own disciplinary trajectories. 2. To shape institutional directions so that it would help in shaping the future trends of the discipline. And 3. To understand how global nexus of knowledge, power and politics construct and shape disciplines. Analysis of Bombay Department of Sociology has helped us to understand 1. How colonial history played a crucial role in shaping and structuring the manner in which sociology was practiced in India, as it was the colonial state that introduced the discipline. Analyzing the disciplinary trajectory in India also facilitated us to reflect on the manner in which the nexus between state power and knowledge are constructed, and one could identify how and why certain perspectives become critical in particular times and particular spaces. Reflecting on the legacy of scholars associated with the department also helped us to think critically on the research and pedagogic practices institutionalized within the discipline that structure our worldview and analytical framework. In this module, we tried to understand how university departments play a very important role in shaping the discipline. While critically analyzing the Bombay School of Sociology, especially the contributions of G.S. Ghure and A.R. Desai, drawing upon the works of Manorama Savoor and Thanagre, we try to understand what are the intellectual and analytical freedom that these scholars have laid out on our paths, especially in terms of influencing the kind of approaches to the study of sociology, and especially trying to see the differences in the approaches that these scholars have given us as sociologists to understand the society. It becomes very important for us to understand the institutional biographies of any discipline. And further, while looking at the whole discourse of the outsider versus the insider in terms of disciplinary histories, it is very important to understand the spatial, historical and the general location of the department in terms of discussing new ideas that sociology shows us.